Konnichiwa, Hajimeni, Konobani Minasan, Konokichi Nakikai, Oataete Kureta Yui Sensei, Nanako Sensei, Ber Sensei, Xochiste Álvaro Hernández, Nikokoro Kara Cancha Sistema. Atatakai Motenashi o Gomo Arigato Gozaimasu. The so-called global era has demonstrated, in addition to the effects caused by the concentration and equal distribution of capital, which has dilated profoundly the domination and polarization among countries, an ability to act as a vehicle for diffusion of local experience, whose assimilation in other contexts implies an incorporation of internal and external elements. Consumption has become one of the principal keys for understanding many contemporary social processes. For Carmen Bueno and Stefan Ayora, there are many questions to be formulated regarding the goods of global consumption. We can ask how they are produced, what defines their global value, what social agents distribute them, how they are transformed through time, what value the consumer attributes to them, and how consumption can impact the generation of new identities. These questions may serve as a guide for understanding young people attached to otaku, viewers and consumers of a product of Japanese origin, which today has been expanded to otherwise remote countries like Mexico. In 80s, otaku spread beyond the limits of Japan to extend right around the world, first through television series, then comic strips, Nintendo games, and towards to the end of the following decade through internet. Virtual space, taking advantage of the immediacy of information flows, has become the principal meeting point for fandom from numerous countries through the configuration of virtual communities. These not only share interests and knowledge about the diverse modalities of otaku, but also participate actively in this parallel fantasy world through the design of histories, personalities, disguises, drawings, and even films, which are products of the community's creativity. To quote Álvaro Hernández, clearly the otaku culture stretches beyond the frontiers of Japanese industry and has become, through a strategy and necessity, representative elements of Japanese culture in the world. Particularly, our first contact with anime was in the 70s through television series, and manga arrived in the early 90s when several comic shops were opened, so it became an important phenomenon with the large-scale conventions like TNT, which bring together thousands of visitors every 4 months. To introduce yaoi word, I can say yaoi is one of the forms of expression of manga and anime, consisting of histories which involve couples of the masculine sex. Its particular characteristic, however, is that they are created on the whole by and for humans. It's not my intention to recount the story of yaoi, so its precedents can be found in the beginning of the 70s with the novels of Motokayo, Keiko Takemiya, and they are the earliest illustrators of these styles. This could be understood as a transformation and a rupture with the historical notions of the body, as well as the appearance of diverse sexualities, which began to make themselves visible around the world at this time. Nevertheless, although the appearance of yaoi in the Japanese market can be located in the 80s, the boom and the global extension of yaoi would occur a decade later. It began to be distributed particularly through two forms: magazines, which could be considered exclusively in the style, and on the other hand, stories with conventional themes, but which contain one or several yaoized scenes. Using internet and social networks, the yaoists have taken advantage of the possibility to spread their work or to discover and exchange material with other enthusiastic of the genre. The creators of yaoi from then on began to produce more complex stories where interpersonal relationships are given more priority than sexual contact. In the yaoi of the 21st century, histories of fashion were mixed, where different forms of human sensibility find a space for expression. Nevertheless, the traditional image of the couple homosexual or heterosexual persists in most examples of the genre. Each partner plays a rigid gender role where only two possibilities are permitted, the active seme or the passive eunuch. Amorous relations became power relations without the possibility of exchange of sexual or social roles. Following Pierre Bourdieu, the social order is represented as a symbolic machine which ratifies masculine domination active in the activities and spaces of each gender in terms of the so-called sexual division of labor. The semantic oppositions between masculine, feminine, public, private space, strong, weak, and active, passive, which still exist between masculine and feminine gender, end up reproducing themselves in homosexual law. It would be around the year 2000 that yaoi arrived in Mexico to install itself in the imaginaries of several groups of young people, principally women, who make up part of Mexican fandom of manga and anime. Distribution has been through two paths: internet forums, those in the Spanish language, and specialized products introduced to the organization of conventions in different parts of the country. As I said before, the TNT convention in Mexico City playing a leading role in this sense. In the beginning, consumption was oriented towards Japanese products which arrived translated into English. Once we didn't reach a Mexican public, it would increase the number of enthusiasts for this style of manga and anime, some of whom would no longer be satisfied with being a passive readers, but would start producing their own characters, illustrators, and histories. Towards the end of the 90s, the fanzine Cherry Blue Dream appeared in Mexico, published by the collective 22nd Century, becoming the first yaoi publication produced in the country. This was followed by several short stories designed by the group of the Pleiades, who have actively promoted the genre and still produce materials. There are several yaoi collectives who understand this literary production as a form of imagined sexual freedom. Between 2008 and 2009, a group of enthusiastic participants published 2 editions of the fanzine Cats and Cream. Not content with being passive readers, this group took advantage of their own life experience to create stories with subject matter ranging from the daily context of the couple, through fantasy, love, and situations oscillating between comedy and tragedy. This fanzine would in turn give way to the magazine Cocktail con Crema, Cocktail with Cream, which appeared in 2010, and until now was consisted of 4 numbers. The project, as a collective effort of 6 women and 1 man, plans to create a publishing house to produce more professionally, achieve greater distribution and recognition of the yaoi genre. Nevertheless, the fundamental question to ask is what is about yaoi which draws young Mexicans, women towards it. In a previous story of Korean yaoi, Suen No point out several reasons for the attraction of yaoi: platonic love between sweet men and the pleasure of voyeurism. Yet behind these elements lies another principal motive: the possibility of transgression, at least within fiction, of the scheme of patriarchal domination through the manipulation of histories of their own invention and ways of imagining relationships and the couple. In other words, seeking no, women as a social minority finds the possibility of gazing at the status quo via yaoi. Female readers free themselves from the stereotype of passive audiences and take the position of active creators. For young Mexican yaois, as well as for some men, and despite this homophobic prejudice which still prevails in Mexico, yaoi has become an interest which permits new ways of thinking about the couple, romantic love, and eroticism, without reservations in a world where affective relationships seem to have become ever more ephemeral and less committed. there are some testimonies of yaois. The nodal point for understanding the influence of yaoi in Mexican fandom rotates around being able to think and sometimes to believe in a world far away from homophobic prejudice and the violence generated by a dominant patriarchal scheme. These are far from being minor problems in this society where behavior is determined by what others think and the increasing display of symbolic and concrete violence. Consequently, yaoi can provide an imaginary outlet for the complicated labyrinth of social life, with its prejudices and limitations towards sexual preference and other ways of concealing love, eroticism, and life with a partner. As a principal conclusion, I can point out that otaku subculture is a form of youth identity which manifests itself in different latitudes far from Japan. At more than 11,300 kilometers of distance, it has managed to find a space in Mexico City and others in the country, gaining an increasing number of followers who religiously attend the Magna conventions held frequently. The principal vehicles to imagining and dreaming about a culture of far-off country, now near, are the elements which otaku unfolds. Although many otaku enthusiasts may never be able to visit Japan, they have created an imaginary cartography which enables them to discern the traditions, taste the food, become familiar with candies, sing in Japanese, and even adopt a nickname. Imbued in the same symbolic language, young Mexican otaku enthusiasts try to be up to date with what is happening in the other side of the world, differentiating between a great diversity of styles and tendencies, choosing those which come closest to their own tastes and personalities. Amongst all these styles, yaoi appears as a different way to tell histories and describe situations. Rejected by many, ignored by others, misinterpreted, and loved by increasingly more human and a minority of men in the world, yaoi is literary genre whose central axis of creation of the free expression of love and eroticism. In its evolution, it has changed gradually from showing histories where the visual and the explicit play a major role, with a semi-dominating anime, to texts which focus on the complexity of human relationships and feelings molded by authors who give expressions to their personal experience, desires, and aspirations. In the particular case of Mexico, yaoi has provoked interest amongst many young people, despite being one of the less distributed genres of otaku, and having against it a rigid patriarchal scheme characterized by strong homophobia. Its followers seem to adopt it as a niche of freedom and transgression, although for others it may be visually attractive, highly aesthetic, and provocative, arousing curiosity for showing a sign for a different kind of relationships. These are two elements of yaoi which may consciously lead us to think of a